So we're going to begin this half of the forum. We're going to first focus on the two statewide issues, and then we will move to the City Council, the one contested race for the at-large position for City Council, and then we'll end with the fire mill levy. So we're going to begin with Proposition CC. And just to remind you what that is, Proposition CC would allow the state government to keep all of the money it collects from existing sources every year over the existing revenue limit and spend the money for public schools, higher education, and transportation projects rather than refund it to taxpayers. Tonight, Representative Dylan Roberts is with us. Thank you for coming here. And he will be, this is a proposition that was referred by the legislature, so Dylan will be speaking on behalf of Proposition CC. Michael Fields, who is the Executive Director of Colorado Rising, was supposed to be here to offer the opponent's view to this. He could not be here because of the weather. What I would suggest is they have a website, coloradorisingaction.org, and so on there are videos and a lot of information about what he would have shared with you tonight. I think with that, we will just go ahead and we're going to let Dylan do a 2-minute opening, and then we'll go into 3 questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks to the Steamboat Pilot for hosting this, and thanks to everybody for being here, and shout out to all the candidates who are running this year. I know what that's like, and it's nice to be here speaking about a ballot initiative rather than myself. But I'm really excited to be here to be speaking on behalf and in favor of Proposition CC. Because one of the things that I heard the most when I was campaigning for the State House from all of you at your door at community meetings was, why don't we spend more and invest more in our education and in our transportation system? And you know that we've had ballot initiatives year after year to fund transportation, to fund education, and those were all in the forms of tax increases. And because we have the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, the voters get to say whether they want those to pass or not. And none of those have passed in recent years. But Proposition CC is a way to invest more in education and in transportation without raising taxes. So right now, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which was passed in 1992, has a revenue cap formula that is imposed based off of population and inflation, so population growth and inflation, and that is an arbitrary cap that gets reset every year after the data comes in on those two numbers. And anything above the cap that gets brought in through existing tax mechanisms, sales tax, property taxes, etc., has to be refunded to the taxpayers. Over the last 27 years, there's been 9 years in which a refund has been sent back out. Right now, if we have a refund this year, it's about $37 per person in the state of Colorado, a one-time refund. Proposition CC proposes, just like all 49 other states in the United States that take in revenue above their cap, that the state gets to keep that and invest it in critical needs in our state. So if Proposition CC passes, the state will be allowed to keep any revenue that comes in over the cap and spend it on 3 major categories: K through 12 education, higher education, and transportation. With such a strong economy, I think this is the right direction for Colorado to go, because we need to use our good economic times and invest it back in our state. So, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, the first question is, what assurances do taxpayers have that the legislature will spend the funds from Proposition CC on the 3 areas referenced in the ballot language?
So that's a great question. So we actually passed 2 bills to create this ballot initiative. One was the bill to put it on the ballot, and then there was a companion bill that says if this measure passes, this money must be spent on these 3 things. That bill was passed into law and was signed by the governor, so that we literally passed legislation that ensures that this money will be invested in those 3 categories: K through 12, higher education, and transportation. So there is statutory language in place ready to go if this ballot initiative passes that ensures that the money will be spent on those 3 things and those 3 things alone.
Okay, why do we need to pass Proposition CC? Doesn't the state's budget have enough funds?
So Proposition CC is critical to pass in the state of Colorado because As many of you know, we've been talking about all night. I don't think we spend enough on our schools and on our teachers and on our roads, certainly. We in Colorado have the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and we have other budget constrictions like Gallagher and Amendment 23 that constrict our budget, and so we don't spend enough on transportation and education. This is a way to invest more in those critical things, if you believe that that's something that the state should do, and I certainly do, without raising taxes. So this is a way to do those things without raising taxes. This is funding that is already collected by the state, and I think it's important that in such a strong economic state that we put that money back into our kids, into our higher education institutions, and certainly into our roads that we travel on every day.
Okay, and so you mentioned this, but opponents of Proposition CC are classifying this as a tax increase, even though it is not imposing a new tax, but it would allow the government to keep monies that would normally be refunded to taxpayers through Tabor. How do you address that opposition?
Well, I mean, the basic definition of a tax increase would be raising a tax revenue or imposing a new tax. That's not what this does. So this money is already being sent to the state by taxpayers. It's not raising anybody's tax rates. It's not imposing any new tax. So it simply goes against the very definition of what a tax increase is to call Proposition CC a tax increase. It's already money that the state's bringing in. So while it is normally money that would be refunded, like I said, over the last 27 years since Tabor's been imposed, there's only been refunds 9 times. They're usually around $30 to $35 per person, one-time refund. I think collectively as a state, if we pool that money together, we can invest it in our kids, in our future, and in our transportation system.
Thank you. So now we're just going to go to closing. That was quick. And Geneva Taylor is going to read a statement to represent the opposition to Proposition CC as her closing.
Thank you.
1 minute.
I didn't know that Mr. Fields was not going to be here until I came tonight, but it just so happened that I had a letter from Bob Beaupre, and I had printed it out and had it with me, so I'd like to read that to you. This is about CC. Your 2019 election ballot is about to arrive in your mailbox. I want to call your attention to Proposition CC and ask you to help me defeat this blatant attempt to overturn Colorado's Constitution and impose a massive tax increase on each one of us. As you understand, Tabor mandates that the tax revenue collected by the state in any fiscal year in excess of the limits imposed by law must be returned to the taxpayers. But Proposition CC would reverse the law and allow state to keep the entire surplus forever. That's right, forever. This is not temporary. This is no emergency situation, no unforeseen disaster. And we sure haven't been in dire economic straits in Colorado. In fact, because of our robust economy and growing population, the state budget has mushroomed to over $30 billion annually. The truth is, they will never think they have enough of your money. And the only way to prevent a runaway train of spending is to keep Tabor intact. Since this law was enacted in 1992, over $3 billion have been returned to the Colorado taxpayers. By keeping a lid on out-of-control government spending, experts credit Tabor as a big reason for Colorado having one of the strongest economies in the state. Now, you know, my background is banking, and I've never believed in a blank check. The only blank check I've ever accepted was the one that my husband gave me when he asked me for my first date. So, no blank checks, please.
Thank you, Geneva. Dylan, if you want to close.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. A few things I'd like to note about Proposition CC when you're considering on your ballot this year. Like I said, this was a measure that was referred by the legislature, meaning it passed both chambers of the legislature. This was bipartisan. And not only did it receive Republican votes, it was co-prime sponsored by a Republican state senator in the state Senate. This proposition honors the taxpayer Bill of Rights by asking the voters if they want the state to do this with their money. That is exactly the intent of Tabor. So we all get to decide whether you want to do this or not. And if we want to change it back in years in the future, the taxpayers can decide to do that as well. This will mean a lot for our state. It is certainly not a budgetary fix to all of our problems, but it could mean a huge, significant positive factor for our state's education and infrastructure. On the transportation level, 40% of the money will go to local infrastructure where local authorities get to decide how it's spent. For higher education, it can go to lowering tuition for our state college students. And for K-12, it can go to improving our classrooms and giving our teachers the bonuses and incentives that they deserve. So I would please ask that you vote yes on Proposition CC.
Thank you very much. Geneva, we need to kind of keep it with how we have it. Yeah, thank you. I want to be consistent. Thanks. Okay, thank you all very much.